Hi, Danny. Sorry. No, it's just for the streaming so that they can hear it on the streaming. It's all right. Thank you. Mhm. Yeah, thank you everybody for coming to the talk today. My name is Charmaine Berry, and I'm going to talk about internal family systems and a little bit about the drama triangle, just so you can make sure you're in the right place with the right workshop. Um, my background is in psychology, in EMDR, and that led me into ego state work, and then that led me into internal family systems. It still has been most sort of impactful, the one stuck, the one use. It really is a kind of a game changer, and most people who come into contact with this therapy can really feel that as well. It's sort of every I in a completely different way, in a way that means that we can really work with this in a very very healing way. It's also transdiagnostic, which means that it can be applied to everything. I wouldn't say absolutely everything, but most of the things that we experience as human beings that might be distressing, or what we term as being distressing, can be helped with this psychotherapy. So all the sort of usual things that we might label under mental health, it also can help with sort of physical ailments as well. There's been trials done helping people with arthritis, um, and different kinds of ailments as well. So and it also really helps us to carve out a spiritual practice. It can be used as a spiritual practice as well, because of the way that it embraces that really important part of our nature. Okay, so I'll just talk a little bit how it was developed over in the United States by a really wonderful man called Richard Schwartz, Dick Schwartz, and I actually had the privilege on 3 separate occasions. It just happened that way about 5 years ago. He's a really, really amazing guy, very humble, very, very down to earth. And I think there's elements that he admits have been kind of channeled also, this information that he did to share with everybody. He kept the sort of spiritual nature of it quite quiet once he was putting it through its kind of empirical trainings and testings, and it actually got evidence-based over in the USA last year, which is phenomenal. That he's managed to kind of like sneak this really spiritual practice into the mainstream. He talks about that a lot more now. But since Fest has exploded all over the world now, so even in the last 5 years, it changed a lot. It's really expanded, and this training is now in most of the countries. It's actually got into China last year, which is phenomenal. They have to call it coaching because they obviously they don't have any mental health issues in China apparently, so it's got a different approach there. So it is also, yeah, it helps us to really really understand the human in all its different kind of ways. Um, I'll talk a little bit about the models. The best way to really experience and understand it is to experience it. So I'm also going to invite you to take part in a little meditation, little guide meditation, begin to connect with what we call the system, the internal family system. I just want to say that the name is a little bit misleading for some people. The reason why it's called internal family system is because was initially an external family therapist, a sort of systems therapist working with families out in the outer world. So and he kind of began to see similarities between the dynamics of people in actual groups. Um, he began to understand that we have a kind of a similar experience going on inside in the inner realm, in our inner world. And that's what internal family systems really helps us to understand, is like what's going on in our inner world. Okay. Um, so some people might refer to that as the ego, and like we can't kind of all understand that we've got an ego, and ego tends to get a bad press, like it's something that we've got to dissolve or to get rid of. But what this therapy helps us to understand is the nature of the ego and how it's structured, and how it's made up. So, the two basic principles of the model are, first and foremost, that is the understanding that we are spiritual and that we all have a kind of a true essence of who we are. In this model, just to keep things simple, we call it the self energy, self with a capital S. And that's the kind of the divinity within all of us. Some people might call that God. We might just want to call that love. We might call it our connection to source. Just whichever term that we feel most comfortable with. We tend to have a kind of conditioning against using the word God, and there's connotations to that, but we just kind of refer to this as the essence of who we are. And this is the kind of the sense within us of joy and bliss and happiness and love. And I think, we can all agree that this is what we might be looking for in our lifetimes, and just that kind of experience of peace within us and peace of mind. So that is who we really are. That's the kind of understanding in this. But there are obstacles to us being in this energy all of the time. Hi, darling. Because why can't we just be in peace and love and harmony and be having an experience of bliss? When we try and do that, it's not that easy. So we know that there's something else going on, and we know that there are obstacles to that. Because what we are feeling is a whole range of emotions instead, and what we're experiencing, all different thoughts, that we're thinking all of the time and we're feeling all of the time. So this model helps us to understand more about that and what is the nature of that. We're thinking and we're feeling, and what this model helps us to do is to look into that and see what's behind that. We're thinking all of the time. Usually it's quite negative in its tone, the way that we're thinking. We've got a conversation going on in our heads pretty much all of the time. It can be made up of quite judgmental or critical or cynical thoughts. And I'd invite anybody to do this as an exercise. Just tune into your thoughts for a day and just get an understanding of what's going on there. And I've been doing this a lot more recently. And, it's not really... it's not really jovial or happy or necessarily supportive. So we've got to really ask, what is that? What's this narrative that we've got running in our heads? And why is it so negative? Why does it seem to be sort of criticizing us? Why are we putting ourselves down all the time in the way that we do? So Dick Schwartz discovered that there is an explanation for this, and that we've got this whole system kind of operating. It's an operating system that is guiding and influencing every single part of our lives. We are listening to it and responding to it. We're either responding to it with an emotion, there's a feeling, and then a behavior, our behavior changes. And this is happening unconsciously. We're not necessarily really tuned into it all of the time. We're just responding to it. So what he discovered is that it's not just like a thought that you're having. When we turn into it and meet with it, it's actually a kind of an autonomous being. Like a thought just isn't a sentence. A thought often has an emotion tied to it, and it's also got a memory tied to it as well. It kind of knows what happened before in the past. Different thoughts get activated at different times. And what he discovered was that in this system is a really complex array of almost like little multi-dimensional 5D beings that are in there, that are all kind of communicating with each other all of the time. And this is why we can get this different sense of tones and opinions and criticisms and judgments in there. It sounds like it's coming from us, but it's not coming from us. It's actually coming from the system. Okay. So he discovered when he was talking to clients one-to-one that they'd say something like, I really don't want to eat that food, but then somebody will shout at me and then I feel activated, and then I've got a voice in my head telling me to go to the fridge and get something to eat. There's like a kind of a sequence of things that happen with these different kind of energies coming in. So 1 minute we can be feeling okay, and the next minute not. We've kind of got activated, we're feeling anxious and stressed, and then we want to try and get rid of that feeling by doing something to soothe ourselves as well. So we've got all these different kind of components. So when he started to really inquire about that, he realized that we could communicate with these parts separately. Now, parts is just a word that he uses to keep things simple, to describe all the different, we might call them alters, we might call them aspects, we might call them beliefs, There's sort of depending on which kind of therapy model you're coming from, but Dick just insists on calling them parts just to keep things nice and simple. So, so what he discovered also is that there are different parts with different roles doing different things inside of the system. It's not just like one kind of entity. So I'll just describe that a little bit, so we understand more about how trauma fits into that as well. So basically, this is my description of it. This is not necessarily Dick's. This is like, it's such a big thing to funnel down and describe, but this is the way that I kind of describe that. Is that basically we are born love, and we are born the essence of who we are. We do have this system that's born with us, that's made up of all these many parts that help us to kind of interact with our 3D world, our world here. So ideally, we'd be raised in conditions of love and light, and these parts will be here to help us to express that and express the fullness of who we are. But what happens is, for the vast majority, if not all of us, we get greeted also with adversity and trauma in our childhoods. And what happens is these parts have to take on different roles to help us to cope with what then becomes our reality in our family of origins, in our childhoods. So when something bad happens to us, which could mean anything that's less than love and light, happens to us in our childhoods, what happens is a part in the system absorbs the energy of what's happened, and takes a snapshot of that incident or these incidents and absorbs the energy of it. So this is what we might call a memory network. It takes in what happened and it takes in all the different aspects of it, because we can't cope with it in that moment. We don't know what else to do. We're too little and we're too small and too vulnerable. So it absorbs the kind of the shock of what's happened, and that whole memory network then becomes a kind of a screenshot, if you like, of you at that time, frozen in time and space. And that part then becomes what we call exiled. So in order for us to carry on functioning after the shock, that part has to be moved out of the way so that we're not continuously feeling it, and it becomes repressed, what Dick calls in the system, in the model, exiled. And it gets kind of, we've all heard of repressed memories, implicit memories, things like that. So that actually, that part, that recording of you in that time, in that place, gets repressed into your mind, into the psyche, and kind of out of the way. And then what happens, the system then kind of just automatically and simultaneously rolls itself in what we call managerial roles to do two things: to make sure that that repressed memory stays down, and doesn't leak back out into the system, so that all the pain and the emotion and all the beliefs and everything that are all kind of encompassed in that exile part stay down. And then there's also managers that we develop. This is all happening unconsciously. You could be 3 days old, you could be 6 months old, you could be 1 year old. At any age or time this is happening, other managers will then develop to ensure that nobody in the outside world sees this. Nobody gets to see this vulnerability that we've got within us. Okay, the system then starts to believe that that is the real you, that it is protecting, and that it's guarding the outside world from seeing as well. Okay. Usually what's happened, and we'll probably all relate to this, that in that moment of the shock, we will have created beliefs something like, I must be a bad person, or there's a sense of vulnerability, or I can't control my environment, or something like that. Some sort of negative core belief will be enshrined within that exile, and it's being kept out of the way in the psyche, and your management system is then working very, very hard to ensure that, for example, in a kind of a practical way, you avoid situations in the future that resemble that, where that might happen again, and also work in a way to ensure that you are showing yourself in the world in a way that nobody knows that that's there. Okay, and then off we go into life. And this is our operating system. We've all got a whole range of exiles in there that were put there probably inadvertently in our childhood. Sometimes it's not inadvertently. People are exposed to all kinds of things in childhood, and we kind of have an accumulation of exiles that we might in other models call core beliefs, that are kind of laid deep into our psyche, and we are all working bloody hard to make sure that nobody knows that they are there. And we're all working really hard to make sure that nobody hurts us again in the same way as we felt back then. And this is kind of our life, you know, and this is what we're doing unconsciously. We're just kind of, because if anything happens in life out in the outer realm, and I'm becoming less and less kind of able to see that there's a difference between our inner world and the outer world. It's all one and the same thing. But as we're working really hard, so I just lost my thread there, I was going to say about it. But yeah, that's what we're doing. We're all working really hard to ensure in our outer world that this doesn't exist, because it's also kind of enshrouded in shame, and it's enshrouded in guilt. These kinds of traumas and things that have happened to us in childhood. Okay. Has anybody got any questions about that at this stage? Is everybody following it? Because it is quite a difficult concept to. Do you want me to shout? Is that this rain again? Okay. Yes. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Okay. All right. Brilliant. Thank you. Yeah. So the question was about what happens, what happens when it does come out, because it does come out. Yeah, the exiles do get activated, and they do come out. So, despite the best efforts of the managers, so our managers are basically, I'll cover this, but the managers are basically working all of the time, and this is what you are hearing in your head. This is your thinking. This is what we think is us, but it's actually the management system organising our lives for us. We might just have to wait a minute. I'm going to have to shout really loud. It's subsiding a bit. Brilliant for the plants, yeah. Good for the earth. Okay. So we've actually got, if I talk like that, can you hear me? Is that okay? All right, brilliant. I'll carry on. So we've actually got two different kinds of managers in the system. So we've got what we might call the preemptive managers. They're like the thinking managers. They're the ones that are making sure that we look good in the morning. Yeah. I've got a speaker in my... No, I've got time to go and get it and sort it all out if I can receive it. What if I go and sit in the middle?
How loud can you shout?
You've got a good voice.
Yeah, I've got a great. No, it's just for the stream.
I'm sure there's a better way of laying it out so more people can be here.
All be quiet. Everyone be quiet.
And now it's time for a meditation.
Say it quietly.
Everybody relax. And now for a guided meditation.
Everybody relax.
One of the musicians has an arm.
I saw people without. Yeah, I saw people without. Yeah.
Musicians. All right.
touching a global dog.
Oh. Wow. Oh. Whoa, it's going quieter. I'll talk really quick. Try and get it all in. Okay. So just coming back to what you were saying there, and more about the managers. So, Dick Schwartz discovered that there's actually two different kinds of managers. There's the preemptive ones, or just talk about there. Those are the ones that you're hearing, kind of like in terms of your thoughts, what you think thoughts are. And then there's a whole sort of, because no matter, even with our best, and no matter how hard we try, we're still going to get activated or triggered. We're still going to be in situations where the exiles just punch through. Something has happened in our outside world that resonates so much so with that original trauma that it reactivates the exile, and all of a sudden we're triggered. Okay. What we don't appreciate is that when we do get triggered in the present time, in the here and now, it's actually got nothing to do with what's happening right in front of you. So this is like a radically different way of looking at things. When we do get triggered, it's always, always, always about the past. It's something that's been reactivated from before. Okay. And that's how the kind of the ego is working. That's how the system is working. It's constantly looking and scanning the environment for things that match this thing that happened to us in the past, in the fear that it might happen again. So its principal role is to protect us. Okay, this is what it really, really thinks it's doing. It's kind of programmed. Here's Natasha. Hi, Daddy. Natasha's done the IFS training as well. Hi, Daddy. So its principal role is to protect us from these terrible things happening to us again. It doesn't have any awareness of the here and now. Its frame of reference for everything that is happening to you in your life is from the past. And it keeps a whole back catalogue of everything yucky or humiliating or embarrassing or shocking that's happened to us. And it's constantly cross-referencing that with your present time experience, which means that it's like impossible for us to be in the present moment with all of this activated and all of it running. So when we meet with it, it is that it is saving you, and that's the whole point of it doing that. Okay. So, but things will happen. We will get activated. We will get triggered, despite the best efforts of what we might call the frontline kind of managers that are preempting everything and checking everything. When that happens, we have a back manager that jump in when we've triggered, we've got activated, put the flames out quickly as possible. And this is what Dick calls the firefighters, also call them soothers. That has learned things that we can do in the here and now, in the present, feel that's. So it tends to correct, and we've all, perhaps every single one of us, got our own got lined up for us, and the egg gets activated. Okay, and it doesn't care how it does it. This is where in other models we're going into the realm of addiction. It doesn't care how it does it, just needs to put the fire out. It's like it'll from everywhere. It doesn't care what the repercussions are or what the damage is that is caused. It's only focused to make egg gets put back down and repressed into the system again. Okay, so if we a really good idea, immediate short term, that bottle of whatever drugs, or even go and spend some money, whatever it is that we do to fix ourselves, but it can you and the self energy within you even it's now become a kind of opposite is looking after its kind of itself that it's looking and where you don't realize that I'm very this is a framework it gives us a understanding to ourselves and understand our thoughts, understand our response, understand our emotions. We can start to feel it. Okay. What else? There's so many different things to remember and so many different elements of it. Kind of addictive system is always trying to balance itself out all the time. So when we do something like that, and the firefighters, you know, we've done whatever, we've drank something or whatever, another part in the system that is kind of recruited within the system to balance that out, and that becomes the critic of the firefighter. So we all know what it's like maybe to wake up on a Sunday morning going, oh my God, what the hell did I do that for last night? And then the criticism comes in. So then we sort of create this loop and this pattern between the firefighter and the critic, and that between those two to sort of make us feel really, really guilty. And then guilty, feeling really crap about ourselves. That might be then activating more exile. So ourselves again. So we can see how we get caught up in addictive patterns at whatever level that is. Really helps us to understand in the healing is to focus on that critic first and get that critic on board and get it to stop criticizing the firefighter, because it's a bit like parents arguing. When the exile hears the firefighter and the critic warring with each other, that we're as crap as we were the day before. So we get in these loops. What else did I want to say? Yes, what we're talking about, this what we call symptoms, we're understanding and can reframe in terms of being kind of the stored material of the exile. Okay, that sort of the emotion of feeling depressed. Okay, anxiety tends to be managed on a kind of a manager level. It's the manager looking out kind of, oh, what if this happens, what if this happens, what if this happens, and it might be sort of running these thoughts and these worries through your head all the time. Not always, it's usually a manager. It's really bad going to happen. Okay, if somebody invites you to a party, you might find all your systems wake up and go, shall we go to this party? What if such things there? What if people are going to be drinking? What if I've got nothing to wear? What if like nobody talks to me? What if I get off it goes? And it's going through all the experiences, all past parties. Assessment, a risk assessment, party or not. Okay. Just as one example. So. Yes, darling. Yep. Coping strategy. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it can actually, yeah, it can have strong anger and strong anxiety, panic, for example, could be like it's like well, not so much panic, but yeah, it's a way of coping with the situation. It's sort of seen as a coping strategy. Um, yes, okay. Also, what's kind of weird, I'm not going to talk about it as much today, is that what's happening on the inside about is the kind of the nature of this and consciousness that these parts are kind of in a kind of dynamic with each other, which has the kind of the essence of victim at its kind of at its core. Okay, I think I need to do a whole separate workshop on that altogether. But for anybody who's interested, there's a really good book called Breaking Free of the Drama Triangle. interacting with each other as okay, and that can change from hour to hour today. It doesn't matter who you're in a dynamic with. Seem to sort of be coming out of these different each other. The whole of society is constructed around this triangular kind of dynamic. So I really recommend that. If you, there's another really good book called Victim Consciousness as well, which explores the kind of the energetic consciousness. You know, and for me, we can't effectively come together in community and join together until we've dealt with this, until we really understand how we're interacting with each other, because we're not coming from a place of love and heart as yet, as much as we all want to. We're coming from this system instead, and this is why we keep falling out, and there's so much conflict and, you know, fireworks. So I really highly recommend that. Has anybody else got any questions? Yes, I don't know. You actually put your hand up before.
So just some of the that you're describing sounds very much like post-traumatic stress disorder.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. So
An absolute description when you're saying about sliding.
yeah. It really does, yeah, thank you. So this gentleman just said it sounds a bit like post-traumatic stress disorder. And yeah, this model really, really encompasses our understanding of that. So IFS is essentially a trauma processing intervention as well, okay. So what we do in the actual therapy, there's an exile that's holding that trauma that's happened, yeah. And so I suppose the rest of the PTSD symptoms, what we call the symptoms, yeah. Because also what's happening all the time, the exile is kind of being repressed. It never gives up trying to get itself healed. So it's trying to push its way through. It's trying to get somebody's attention to heal it. We could even get a little bit more woo-woo and say, well, I do notice it. I tend not to. Yeah. You're right. Anybody else that, yes?
Hi. Yeah, so you talked about this drama triangle of the victim, abuser, and rescuer, and how this plays out into all of our relationships. Does that include in healthy, supportive relationships? Are they still these roles that we're falling into in sort of positive relationships with people?
Yeah, I mean, if it's a healthy, what we might call a healthy relationship, and we're not coming from our part system, and it's more like heart to heart, it's going to be a lot more. Yeah, we're not going to be sort of using some, be challenging them, but it's coming from the right sort of play. So it's kind of like a tuned up version of that when it's coming from a really healthy, heart-led place. Yeah, it does happen. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Panic attack can be an exile that's burst through in that moment. We've just got completely overwhelmed, and they do what we call it blends into the whole nervous system. So the exile blends in and we become it. We're in the panic attack. We're feeling what that exile felt way back when in the original experience, kind of thing, yeah. Okay. It helps us to really explain what we might see as symptoms. But what we do with this model, instead of like pathologizing it, thinking it's mask it, you know, make it into something wrong. We don't. We turn into it, and we find what I'll talk about in a second.
So obviously you've got the negative connotation. So could you reinforce the positive? You know, like great, like your new management team. Like you understand, like your exile. So you actually go, okay. So by breathing, this is something that was good for me at that time. So I'm going to reinforce that. Tell my body that that's a reinforcer.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you change your management.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you change your management system? Yeah. So yeah, of course we can bring in different management strategies for the system. So this is what we might, but we might have to sort of nurture that and develop that. So Natasha's going to talk about doing a daily practice next. Sue? Morning routine. Like what things can we do to sort of bring in like a new management system? But what we do in the healing is when we actually do the healing. The kind of the focus of it is to heal the exiles, because when the exiles are healed, the rest of the management system can calm down because it hasn't got that exile to protect any longer. Okay, so we do that by very carefully navigating into the system. Because it's here kind of in the limbic region of the brain, we can close our eyes and connect with it by just focusing in on the symptom or the thought or a memory, we can actually connect with the system. So we do that in a very kind of careful and considered way. We don't just want to go straight to exiles. Usually with the exiles. So we have like kind of like in a scripted way. There's a lot to describe about this in this short period of time, but we're basically taking our self energy, using the self energy, the healing power of who we really are, and kind of shining that. There's usually some resistance to us there in the beginning. But when we do eventually meet with the exile, we take it through a trauma healing process, part of which is to witness the trauma. We honor and we treat all the parts with the uttermost respect, but we deeply honor and acknowledge and witness what happened to that exile in our own childhoods, that representation of us in that moment in our childhoods. And we do that from a place of self-energy. So after the witnessing, we then invite the exile to let go of the energy. We offer to an element. It's quite shamanic in its practice, this sort of part of it. And we feel that happening to us as we release this traumatic energy. In this inner realm, we literally feel this in our bodies. When that's happened, we then go back to the managers that have been looking after it all this time, who have witnessed what's just happened to the exile, and we re-roll the manager. This is where we can give it a different role. What it tends to do is come off from what it was doing before, because it doesn't have to do it now. So, and it will find its own, what was its original managerial style, which will be something a lot more creative and connective and a sort of a more positive way of, yeah. So that's the kind of the process with the healing. Okay, let's see how much time we've got. Does anybody know what time it is? 1:15. Okay. It's a very, very brief meditation. Yeah. Okay. So that you can begin to get a feel of what it's like to connect with your own system. Yeah, if you got it. Oh, sorry. So I can see what time it is. Okay. So get comfy if you can. All right. We're going to set a collective intention here just to meet with managers. Okay. Now, we can't always predict that, but that's going to be the intention that we have. And again, we're just going to let your systems know that we're only going in for a few minutes and then coming back out again. Hiya. So, yeah, just settling down and getting as comfy as you can, or standing up's fine. All right. So first of all, I'm just going to ask you to slightly alter your breathing if you need to, just so that you're breathing out for slightly longer than the breath in. And maybe just relax your shoulders, just let them drop a little bit. Maybe just relax around your tummy if there's any tension there, and just allowing yourself to soften. Okay. And then I'm going to ask you to think of something, bring to mind something that perturbs you about 3 out of 10. We're not going to go for anything big or deep, just something that irritates you. That could be a person, could be a situation, could be the rain, just something not too deep, just something that's bugs. And bring that to mind. And I'm going to invite you to tune into how that feels, noticing where there's an emotional response or a physical response, maybe a kind of a tension or a tightening. Just noticing where you may feel that in the body or around the body. And tapping into the part's response to what it is that you bring into mind. And then inviting you to take your mind's eye, your inner eye, and direct that inwardsly as if you're going to see what this sensation is from the inside. So whatever term works for your mind's eye, your inner eye, could be like you're imagining a camera is going to this space so that you can see it from the inside. And then just be very, very mindful of anything that you notice. It could be subtle, it could be an obvious thing, it could be a memory, it could be an image, it could be something completely random, it could be a version of you. Just noticing whatever comes up as you focus your attention in. And if in any way it looks like it could be a part, or feels like a part, see if you can be with it in some way. Just have a little bit of space between you as you observe this part, this sensation, in whichever way it's conceptualized. And then a question we use a lot in this model is, how do you feel towards this part? How do I feel towards it? You're beginning to differentiate between who you are and who this part is. How do I feel towards it? And if you feel anything less than favorable towards it, that means there's another part still blended with you here. And that's okay, just to stay there, just to be aware of how you're feeling towards this part, staying in that dynamic with it. If you're feeling any compassion towards this part, or any curiosity, maybe you could let it know that you're there, let it have your attention, notice your presence. And maybe you could ask it what its role is. And you may or may not get an answer. Ask it, what is it afraid would happen if it wasn't in this role, if it wasn't doing this job? Okay, and then just reminding it we're only here for a minute or so, we're just checking in, just getting to know, get a sense and a feel of the system. Thank it for being here, thank you for allowing you to connect with it. Ask it if it needs you to come back and check in with it again at a later point, in your own time. Okay. And if that all feels okay, thank it. We treat all these parts with the uttermost respect and care. They are working constantly on what they think is our behalf. Okay. Say goodbye to the part. If that feels okay. Then when you're ready, opening your eyes, coming back into this space. Okay, it was a quick journey in, a quick journey out. Okay, we've got a few minutes. Would anybody like to share anything about what just happened for them? Or if nothing happened for them?
Is it really a bit about forgiveness? Is it forgiving people or events or, whatever it might be that we've been resentful about or have really hurt us in the past?
I think what happens in the process is there isn't a kind of an explicit focus on that, but as we begin to let go of these past events, we realise that in the present there isn't anything to forgive because we've released it. Okay. So the holding grudges and the not forgiving and the kind of the betrayal, the sense of betrayal and all those kinds of things that we also experience are roles that have been taken on by the managers, essentially. Okay, and also the feelings of the exiles as well from that time in that moment. So as we begin to release these energies out of the system, that kind of seems to happen in a natural way. We don't have to make, a conscious effort to. We just realise there is nothing there to let go of anymore. We've released it. Okay, that would be the ultimate goal. But I suppose forgiveness essentially in its pure form, in its kind of quantum form, is a very, very, very important part of healing. But that's another workshop for another time, because that's another massive, massive subject. Okay. Hi, darling. Yeah. 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 Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, you're right. We can get completely hijacked. And we know logic has gone out of the window because essentially the thinking style of these parts isn't logical, because it's about the past, it's not about now, so it's not logical. And the way that it strategizes is stuff that it's picked up from childhood, which is basically avoid, get under the bed, close your eyes and hope nobody sees you. Like these kinds of like very, very young childlike strategies, yeah. So when we get completely hijacked like that, what we can do is try and remember to take the tension out of our bodies. Try and breathe, even if we just shift the breathing, so we're breathing out. When we change the breathing, we're literally going into a different part of the nervous system that Neil's going to talk about at 3:30. We're going to talk about the polyvagus nerve theory, which ties in with this, but there's no time. So we can soften, we can breathe, and then what we can do is ask the part to unblend. Okay, parts just seem to understand these words. Dick Schwartz has spent a lot of time developing this vocabulary, but it just seems to understand, and we can ask it to unblend. We ask it to move back out of the nervous system. Please move out of it's hijacked your nervous system. So we're asking it to move back out. We can use terms like, please give me some space. We can even say to that feeling that's hijacked, so it's like, right, I've got you. Like we turn up with it, we become co-conscious with the experience rather than just get like lost in it and we're losing the plot or whatever. Yeah. So it's a really, really powerful world. Just that as a technique in itself, the unblending technique, with practice as well. The more we practice it, we can do it. But takes time to develop that. But we're also kind of claiming sovereignty when we do that. We're claiming our own self-energy. We're coming from a different place. We are not at the peril of our emotions and our emotional system when we bring self-energy to it. But first of all, differentiate ourselves from it. It's okay. Yeah. Ideally, it's good to work with a therapist to get some sort of real sort of guidance, yeah. But there's an awful lot you can do yourself as well. There's a chap called Jay Early who's developed a whole self-help range for working with parts for yourself. There is tons of stuff on the internet as well, just to sort of get things going. I hold a monthly IFS group as well, just to share tips. I've got a Facebook page as well with information on there. It becomes a way of living. IFS for me is a way of living. I don't, I kind of process the world very differently now. I'm processing it through this system. What part is that? All my friends do it as well. Most of the people I know, we relate to each other in terms of IFS. Like, our communication is a lot better. When we get angry with somebody, it's part that does that. We're not personalizing it. We're not totalizing that emotion. So we can have golden. That's absolutely amazing in our relationships and in our community that we can do that. It's also really annoying when you're in it and your friend's going, that's one of your parts, isn't it? To to be about them and you want it to be about you. And it's not. This is part to part activation that's going on. It's our past stuff that's playing out with each other all the time. And we can start to get healing and progress through that once we recognize what's actually going on. We can really start to feel empowered when we don't have to be scared of our own thoughts. When we can turn into them and find out who they really are and find out what they want. It's kind of the opposite of meditation, where we meditate away, and if you keep ignoring them and ignoring them and ignoring them, they'll go. And not to say that meditation is not a good thing. It's brilliant for stilling the mind and bringing to self-energy. But why don't we turn into it and find out what it actually needs? Why don't we go to the source of the thoughts and heal the trauma that is lying behind them? Okay, we could all do that, and there's lots of different ways of doing it. I know not everybody can afford therapy, so get the self-help stuff. Look on the internet. I encourage people to do. So powerful and strong in its own right. You don't have to have a psychology background to go and do the training. It's 3 over an 8-month period or something like that. Highly recommend it. Just even doing the training was a massive healing process for everybody who does it. Okay. So we've run out of time, and I've just talked about a fraction of it today. We should be here all day really to just even begin to get the essence of it. There's loads of stuff that I've missed out around it. Okay. There's a website, yeah. So I'm quite happy to email out a resource list. I'm gathering everybody's registered on Eventbrite, and everybody's email addresses are on there. So what I might, we'll just, if you come and I'll take your details, yeah? I've got a resource list with all the different podcasts and in internet websites, everything that you need on there. You can come and ask me. You can friend me on Facebook, Charmaine Berry, or message me on there as well. You can get hold of me through the Naya Centre. Yeah, we'll figure out a way of of doing that. Okay. One last question, maybe we've got.
Just a thought, really. I just think codependency came up for me.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering what IFS, in a nutshell, maybe what it's linked to codependency.
Yeah.
Does it speak about codependency?
It does speak about codependency, yeah. As being a kind of a strategy. It also sort of fits into the victim triangle as well, like being in that dynamic.
With yourself and your past, and that kind of, playing that relationship out with something that's not here anymore, doesn't have to be here anymore.
Yeah. We might have like a needy part in us who sees a solution in somebody else, and then we finish up in that kind of almost like addictive pattern with them. Our happiness is dependent upon them doing that, and they're not going to do it. So but we can have a chat about that. But yeah, it does embrace that as well. Okay. All right, thank you everybody. That's the end of the talk, and I'm here if you need anything. Thank you.